transitions. Okay, now we're recording. Awesome. So welcome. Thanks for joining us for Reignite, Navigating Career Transitions in the Face of Imposter Syndrome, Rejection Sensitivity, and Burnout. I'm so glad to have you here. And I just want to start with a grounding exercise, just to help us feel present and like to kind of get in the zone for talking about this topic. So I invite you to close your eyes. You can either sit or stand, just have your feet firmly planted on the ground. And I invite you to put one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. And just like feel what's happening in your body right now. You can take a deep breath. And you don't need to change your breath. You can just notice what's happening with your breath. I also want you to think about what it is that you need more of, what you want to channel more of. Is it courage, self-compassion, self-trust? What is it that you feel like you want more of? And I want you to take a deep breath and inhale what it is that you need more of. And on your exhale, I want you to let go of something that's not serving you. Perhaps it's self-doubt. Perhaps it's other people's expectations or perfectionism or overthinking. So again, I want you to breathe in what it is you need and breathe out what it is you want to let go of. And do that one more time. Breathe in what you need and breathe out what you want to let go of. Okay, we're gonna open our eyes, we're gonna move, we're gonna shake a little bit. Shake that off. Thanks for doing that with me. So I wanna start with just going over some of the goals of why we're here today and what this workshop is about. So I would really love to connect the dots for between imposter syndrome, rejection sensitivity, and burnout, especially in the face of career transitions. I'm going to offer some perspective to help you recognize how some or many of the systems that we live in are influencing our decision making, so that we can decide to act differently, take action in a different way, make decisions in a different way. I'm also going to share my coaching framework, which you can use whenever you're experiencing this feeling of being stuck. And I also just want to offer, I'm so happy you're here. I hope you get a ton out of it, but I also just hope that you take what you need and leave the rest. If you walk away with one little tiny nugget of something that is helpful, I will be thrilled. So a little bit about me. I'm Lauren Goldberg. For those of you I haven't met, I'm so excited to meet you. And for those I do know, thanks for being part of this community. I am honored to live and work from the lands of the Narragansett people, colonized as Providence, Rhode Island. I am proudly neurodivergent. I have ADHD and I am partially deaf. And the reason that I mention this is because it is a very important influence on my perspective, on the way that I see the world, and looking at things from a disability justice lens. So you'll hear me talk a lot about that as we go. And before becoming a coach and entrepreneur, I had a background in organizational culture, employee experience, and working for social impact organizations in behavior change. And now I call myself a luminous coach, because what I'm doing is I'm helping clients find what lights them up and figure out how they want to make the world a better place and how to go about doing that. So we are here to talk about burnout. So I wanted to start with a quote from Emily and Amelia Nagasaki's book called Burnout, which I actually admittedly haven't finished. I'm in the process of reading it right now, but there are just so many like juicy quotes that I wanted to capture and share for you. So they say wellness is not a state of mind or a state of being. It's a state of action. It's the freedom to oscillate through the cycles of being human, from effort to rest, from sleeping to waking, autonomy to connection. And burnout is what happens when we get stuck. So burnout is really the cycle of feeling extreme overwhelm and exhaustion. And as I'm sure some of you have experienced, it's like so easy to cross that line from feeling tired to all of a sudden experiencing extreme difficulty with everyday tasks because of that exhaustion. So I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page about like what it is we're actually talking about. I also want to just cover some of the definitions of imposter syndrome and rejection sensitivity. So as some of you may have experienced imposter syndrome, feeling anxious and not experiencing success internally despite high performance. This condition often results in people feeling like a fraud, a phony, and doubting their own abilities. So according to BetterUp, that is imposter syndrome. And that is the way that we'll that's sort of just a shared definition for us for this workshop. I also want to talk about rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And so if you haven't heard of this, the reason that I felt so strongly about talking about it today is when I started talking about this like doing this workshop on burnout, on imposter syndrome, and I was crowdsourcing questions, one of the questions that I got is, how does this experience, how is this different for neurodivergent folks or people that have ADHD? And so I wanted to call attention to this because it's got some overlap with imposter syndrome, but it is different. And so rejection sensitive dysphoria is the experience of intense, severe emotional pain in response to perceived rejection, criticism, and failure. It goes beyond disliking the experience of rejection and like actually feels like intolerable or excruciating. And so I use the term rejection sensitivity just to describe the spectrum from this rejection feels unpleasant to, or this perceived rejection feels unpleasant to this perceived rejection feels excruciating. So I just wanted to preface that. So before we go any further, I just want to launch another poll to see what resonates with you. So you'll see a little pop up, perhaps a new poll has been launched. Which of these resonates with you most strongly? So I'm just going to pop over there to the poll and see what folks have said. So it looks like a lot of folks are feeling all three of these. All of these resonate. Okay, awesome. Well, feel free to keep adding contributions to the poll or using the chat, but I'm gonna keep moving. So I want to share an example of what this can look like, just to connect the dots between these three concepts. So as I'm sure many of you have experienced with rejection sensitivity, with imposter syndrome, there's a lot of overthinking, right? And that is very exhausting. It costs a lot of energy to overthink. And so, you know, often we can, it doesn't necessarily start there, but when you have this feeling of exhaustion, you have low emotional capacity, low mental capacity, low physical capacity. A lot of, the systems that we live in make us feel guilty and like we're not doing enough, like we're not trying hard enough, that we're lazy. And I just want to, I want to put out a question, in your career transition, in what ways has guilt come up? And so when we feel this guilt, it's often like, okay, well, I need to just try harder and grind through it. And as we know, that can lead to burnout. And once you're burnt out, you can also experience sickness, like I said before, easy things feeling hard, depression, et cetera, which can often exacerbate those feelings of rejection and rejection sensitivity and imposter syndrome, right? So that's why I call this a vicious spiral. So this is one way that can look. If you have like an example of how guilt comes up in your career transition, feel free to put it in the chat. One example that Kristen and I were talking about was when you feel like you have to apply to a certain number of jobs in a day or in a week, and you like don't hit those numbers, and you feel like I didn't do enough today. It could come up when we're talking about like networking, and I think like in concept people know like networking can help me, I should network, but they feel guilty if they aren't doing it enough, or they feel like they're not doing it the right way. What are some folks saying? So guilt comes up for me. Sarah says guilt comes up for me for being so far along in my job search. Like I'm not doing more, trying more. Yeah. And then Nico says just the never ending need and work, feeling guilty that you can't get to all of the work. It's impossible. Yeah. Leaving a 6-figure job for a low paying position that I'm passionate about. Yeah, I'm gonna talk more about that for sure. Thank you for sharing those. So this, as I mentioned, was one way that this can look, but I want to offer a different, like flip this on its head. What else could this look like? How else could this play differently that feels better for humans that are not robots and have bodies that fluctuate and feelings that fluctuate and mental capacity that fluctuates. And so I want to offer this as an example, and this is going to look different for everybody. But if we are prioritizing longer periods of rest, nourishing activities, that's not necessarily taking naps. That could be like, that could be working out, that could be creative projects, but just whatever it is, it's filling your cup first. So much of our conditioning is like we are taught that we need to earn our rest and earn our fun, earn our joy. And so I want to flip that on its head and say we should really be prioritizing filling our cup first. In addition to that, we can set ourselves up with support. maybe check-ins with our support squad, with our mentors, with our, with our people who are, will be cheering us on and yeah, and helping us along the way. That could be a coach, that can be a friend. Setting time limits, right? I'm not going to work. I'm only going to apply for, I'm only going to look for jobs like for 4 hours a day rather than 8 hours a day, because like I just can't even, right? I'm making this up, whatever works for you. I want you to prioritize, but just making sure that they're like, you can't, like, you may not be in a position where you can be job searching 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, right? Working in like spurts and then taking long breaks. And then also creating time to celebrate what you're doing and learning and integrating what you're learning. So I want to offer this as just one example, because this is going to feel better than, than this. So in concept, we know, like, okay, yeah, this would probably be like a good way of doing things, but it's not that easy. And so I want to shed light on why it's not that easy. And so another quote from Emily and Amelia Nagasaki in their book Burnout is that the game is rigged. And when we understand how the game is rigged, we can start to play by our own rules. So me, like, kind of dumping all of this, these next few like slides of information on you and perspective is to help break the glass so that we can understand how these influences impact our decision making and like how we treat ourselves, how we talk to ourselves, so that we can start to make the shift away from it. So toxic professionalism is a concept that I use, an umbrella term that I use to describe a like this collection of oppressive standards that have been set by supremacy culture. So what does that look like? It can look like perfectionism, feeling like we need to be perfect all of the time. It can be permanence, feeling like we need to stick it out, even if it's not right for us. I hear from a lot of clients that want to leave their job. They feel like they can't because they don't, they like need to stick it out a year with their toxic boss because they don't want to have such a short period of time like listed for their job on their resume. So, or feeling like we need to find our forever job. So these are like the pressures that we feel around permanence. Projected progress, which is like, my peers are moving up the ladder and I need to keep up. Like at this point in my life, I should be making this much money and I should have this title and this status, and I need to keep up with the Joneses. People pleasing. This could look like, my parents want me to get an MBA, but I actually want to go back to school to get a teaching degree and be a teacher. But feeling like the pressure that you have to get an MBA because that's what your parents want. So so that is how toxic professionalism can play out, that influences that it can can have on us and our decision making. But I also want to talk about where this comes from. So this is all rooted in dominance and supremacy culture. I use those two kind of interchangeably. And that comes from capitalist culture. It comes from white supremacy. It comes from classism, patriarchy, ableism, fat phobia, and I know there's a bunch of those that I can list here. But in all of these cases, it's we are able to recognize a group trying to like assert its dominance over another group. I also want to share my perspective on imposter syndrome, which is partially, which you could argue is internalized dominance, right? This idea of like, I'm not good enough, I'll never be good enough because I don't have X, Y, and Z. It's like, it's internalizing this supremacy culture, this dominance culture, and it can be deeply rooted. And so we have to uproot and unlearn to try to like recognize that that's not how we want to treat ourselves. That's not how we want to live our lives and pursue our careers, right? And I also want to point out that in our culture, we have glorified busyness and fast paced over slow and restful. And this is because in a capitalist society, it's all about, or capitalist culture rather, it's all about like your value is tied to how much you contribute to the system, how much money you make, how much you extract, how much you put back in. And so this is also very ableist. So while we're talking about mental health and how our mental health fluctuates, at some point in our lives, we will experience disability. We will have a disability. It might be temporary, it might be long-term, it might be permanent, but even during times where we are burnt out or we are experiencing depression, anxiety, and like really debilitated by what's happening mental health wise in our bodies, you know, we are not this like keeping up with the busyness, keeping things fast paced is not going to be realistic. I can tell you, like, very, admittedly, I have not done anything quickly in my life except run. I ran track in high school and college. But pretty much everything else that I do is slow and thoughtful. And, it takes me time to process things. And that's not a wrong way to be. So I just wanted to offer that. So again, that we can like move away from this, like everything needs to be fast and quick and go, go, go. And like really prioritizing and putting value into slow and restful and ease. I also got another question when I was crowdsourcing for this workshop, and the question I got is, why does it feel like anti-hustle is the new hustle? And so I wanted to point out that self-care is often gets confused with self-improvement. It's like we always need to strive for something. We need to like strive for constant healing. We need to strive for the next like diet or fad or and that, that can be very manipulative. And that's why I wanted to just point out the wellness industrial complex, which, we are fed these lies about what wellness should look like instead of really taking stock in what we need. All of our bodies are different. All of our minds are different. We are going to need, those basic like food, water, sleep is like that's going to overlap. But I just want to encourage you to take stock in what you need and knowing that that's going to change. There's also a stigma against not feeling okay. So that makes this harder, right? That often brings up negative meta feelings. Like we feel bad about feeling bad. And so I want to destigmatize that whole, like, it's not okay to not feel okay. And so as we keep getting these pressures reminding us like we're not doing it right, it just reinforces this like rooted fear that we're not good enough, which, as we've talked about, it's like often what's tied to feeling the imposter syndrome, feeling the rejection sensitivity, feeling burnt out, exacerbating the whole vicious cycle. Okay. But I think we can all agree that we're here because we say, fuck that. That's not how we want to, that's not a sustainable, like, it's not sustainable for us to continue like going on this path. I want to give you a permission slip, but I also want to encourage you to give yourself a permission slip. You know that you don't need to earn rest and care and joy and fun. I know from experience, and Kristen and I talked about this yesterday, like it's almost as if like if you know, when you're between jobs, you're not working and you're like not getting a regular paycheck, it's like there's a guilt that comes up with doing something fun for yourself. My argument is that fun is required, rest is required, care and joy are like, gotta fill your cup first. Also, I want to sever this like this deeply rooted idea that our worth is tied to our productivity and our job title and our paycheck. Because what happens is we grow up putting so much weight into what we do for work. We're taught to put so much weight into what we do for work as one of the big parts of our identity. And so when that's not going well, it feels like an identity crisis. So if we're able to separate that and recognize that we are so much more than what we do for work, that is like, we'll be able to embrace our worthiness of that care and that rest and that joy and that fun, no matter what. And I've said this a few times, and I'm going to keep saying that mental and emotional well-being will fluctuate. It's going to change. I want to destigmatize the shit out of it. Right. So at this point, if you are feeling really overwhelmed by like everything that we're talking about, I just want to offer this as your only assignment. Your only thing to worry about right now is to start with the basics and ask yourself, have I had enough water? What food am I putting in my body that makes me feel good? Do I need more rest? Do I need to move my body more? What is my body telling me? I think that often when we get so overwhelmed, we forget. We forget about the basics. And oftentimes this is all we need as a stepping stone, as the foundational piece to start to feel better. So again, if you are feeling really overwhelmed and this is all you take away from this workshop, I would be so happy for you. Okay. I'm going to I'm just taking a look at my notes, make sure I don't forget anything before we go into like more of the workshopping. Okay, I think I got everything. So I just hit you with a lot of stuff. So this takes work. So if this next part is challenging for you, know that it can take practice. So I want to share with you my coaching framework, which I call the Kind, Bold, Badass framework. And what we're doing with this framework is we are excavating what is not serving us and building self-awareness. We are figuring out what it is that is invigorating to us so that we can build self-compassion, build those self-compassion muscles. And then they're also going to be figuring out what action we need to take to advocate for ourselves. And the more we self-advocate, the easier it becomes. So I'm going to go and give examples, and I'm going to give you some time to reflect on each of these things. But you'll see, to put this into practice. Oh, and like I said, this is a tool that you can use whenever you're feeling stuck. I use this with pretty much any situation where I'm feeling like I'm not sure what direction to go next, what action to take, I'm feeling overwhelmed. This can be used in a variety of different scenarios. So it's a good tool to have in your toolkit. So what does this look like if you put it into practice? So this first foundational piece is excavating what we don't need. So so the question that you're answering is, what do I need to excavate? And asked another way is, what story is my inner bully telling me? For me, this was when I was in my my last big career transition. It was, wanting to start a new business, but not feeling like I could really, having a lot of self-doubt about myself and my skills, and also that internalized ableism, well, I think my disabilities will just get in the way and it will make it hard and I won't be successful, right? That's what my inner Billy was telling me. And I really needed to excavate that. So it helped to write that out and see it and be like, well, that's not how I want to talk to myself. That's not what I want to believe about myself. And being able to recognize the societal pressure that was fueling that, which is ableism and that internalized ableism. And it was really a crucial step to being able to shift from I can't be an entrepreneur to I'm going to be a fucking entrepreneur. I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to do it. I'm going to embrace that new identity. So, so some other questions to ask. What does internalized dominance look like in this case? So we talked about that before. What is it that feels? What is fueling the imposter syndrome? What is fueling the, what part of this supremacy culture is contributing to this? And just simply what thoughts are not serving me. So again, this is to build foundational self-awareness so that we can start to alleviate those unwanted pressures. So I want to give you a minute to just answer the question, what do I need to excavate? What story is my inner bully telling me? Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute to just jot some things down, and then we'll move to the next one. Also, feel free if you want to take a screenshot of this and reflect on some of these other questions later when you have more time. Like, totally cool. Definitely support that.
You'll also be getting the recording of this too.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're gonna keep moving. Okay, so that next step up is invigorate. What do I need to feel invigorated? What do I need to fill my cup first? So asked another way is, what do I need right now? What do I need to feel like I can talk about my needs, my dreams, my desires freely? What am I learning about myself in this process? And what does my inner best friend say? I think sometimes it helps for us to tap into like what our actual best friend would tell us, or what we would tell our um, our friend who is coming to us saying, "Hey, I'm struggling with this." So this is helping to build that self-compassion, that habitual self-compassion. And so, so again, what this could look like is like, I chatted with a client a few years ago who was job searching and was spending so much time job searching and had like chronic back pain and was just like feeling very stiff and like and was struggling. And when I asked what is it that would fill your cup outside of job searching, like what activity could you do that would like feel nourishing? And he said hiking, that he like feels really rejuvenated from time outside, from hiking, from the physical activity. And yeah, I just love that example because you know, that that allowed him to like figure out how to work hiking into his like into his schedule each week while he was still job searching, and feeling like that kind of kept him going and kept him enjoying his time, um, even when he was like going through this tough transition. So I'm going to give you a few like 30 seconds or something just to jot down what is it that you feel like you need to be invigorated. What would fill your cup first? And again, feel free to take a screenshot of this if you want to dive into some of these other questions later. Alrighty, we're moving and grooving. Number 3, what action can I take to advocate for myself? So I feel like so much of job searching, job applications, job interviews, networking is self-advocacy. Um, but there's also like some some advocacy that like doesn't really have to do with the job search itself, or it's not directly related to the job search or career transition. It could be that you like every time you speak to your parents, they ask you, how is the job search going? And it's like triggering for you. You know, maybe an action item for you is to tell them, like, I'll bring up that topic when, you know, when I have something to report or something like that, right? An action item could just be like, I need to set up time in my calendar to rest, to not job search, to go for a hike, for creative projects. So what is one small change that you can make this week? And how can you get the support that you need to make that change? How can you hold yourself accountable? Do you feel like you need more information to move forward on something? How can you get that information? So what is that one action that you can take? And again, what we're building towards is grounded, confident self-advocacy and moving you closer to the impact that you want, whether that's more rest, more time for creative projects, more, more time for reading, or just more energy so that you can like be enjoying, creating time for joy. So I'll give you a few seconds here to just jot down what action can I take to advocate for myself. And feel free to take a screenshot before I head to the next slide. Okay. So putting this all together, in the most simple terms, what do I need to advocate? What is my inner bully saying? Step two, what do I need to be invigorated right now? What's my inner best friend saying? And number three, advocate. What do I need to advocate for myself? What small change can I make? And what do I need to make that happen? So feel free to share in the chat if there's anything that you want to share, or raise your hand and you can share out loud. If you want to keep this to yourself, that's okay too. We welcome that. And again, I just want to re-emphasize that this is a tool that you can use for so many different scenarios. It's like a good like generalist tool, because you can apply it to so many different scenarios, like whenever you're feeling overwhelmed and just need to focus on the immediate next action that is lighting you up, that's energizing you, and moving forward towards the impact that you want to create. Thank you for sharing, Caitlin, who says, I need to excavate the thought like you're not making a smart or safe choice. My best friend would say, stay strong, you got this. Cheering you on. Thanks for joining, Abby. And Caitlin says, I need to advocate for more time for meditation. Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, feel free to keep sharing if you want to, but I just want to wrap up with the slides with a few reminders. So you don't earn rest. Rest is required. You fill your cup first. You know that your emotional and mental well-being will fluctuate, and that is normal. Let's destigmatize that. And despite what capitalism tells us, our worth is not tied to our productivity. It is so important for us to sever that so that we truly know that we are worthy of things outside of what's connected to our jobs, our job title, our paycheck. And overthinking, like that associated with imposter syndrome and rejection sensitivity, is exhausting. It will happen. We can acknowledge that. And we can also acknowledge that it costs us a lot of energy. Where else do you want to spend that energy? So I want to leave you with an affirmation that you can say in the mirror every morning if you want. You can say during meditation. You can, do grounding exercise like we did at the beginning and say that to yourself. But I want you to say this and really feel it. I am enough. I am worthy of peace. I am worthy of joy. And that's no matter what. So to do a time check, we have 9 minutes here. So we do have some time for questions. If I didn't see if there were any questions, Kristen, in the chat.
I didn't see any questions come up yet.
Okay. And then there's also, yeah, okay, cool. Well, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them as best I can.
Oh, it looks like Sarah has a question.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
I appreciate, like that slide where you just said like the basic level things you can do to kind of reset. I am on essentially like year 3 or 4. I was laid off in 2020, have been trying to make a career transition, went to school again, have been volunteering and working in contract roles and interviewing, and am just super burnt out, like have worked with coaches, have, pretty much done all the things and feel like, I'm at the point where I know what I need to do for my job search. I know what I need to do to, make myself feel good while handling all of this. But I just like am in like this pit of like determined unwillingness to do all of those things almost, because like at this point it feels like none of those things that I do matter or change anything, because it to an extent is out of my control, the job search. So I like point to that as evidence for like not doing the rest of it, including networking, including, so I'm just wondering, like, in addition to those basic level things, is there anything else I can be doing to kind of turn around that narrative and being like willing to try things again that, will just like help me start feeling better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, first, I just want to say, like, so badass that you've been able to do so much in 4 years. Like all the stuff that you just listed off, the consulting, the volunteering, the school, like you have, it's not like you've done stuff. So I want you to like acknowledge that, and I want to like congratulate you on that stuff. And I totally hear what you're saying, that it's like you are actively trying not to do stuff anymore. It's hard to stay motivated. And like, yes, going back to basics. And my question for you is, what would, I'm just trying to figure out like how I want to ask this question. What do you have anything that you know, before you were laid off, that brought you joy?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing was like I was doing administrative work to support myself while doing creative things. Like originally it was acting, but then I had been doing screenwriting, and even that like kind of has a hustle aspect to it, but that was like the thing that was bringing me joy. And like I've been having this struggle of like, well, I could do those things, but like I'm also fixated on like, oh my God, I have to find a job that will pay me, you know. So I've definitely identified that like I've just shelved that whole creative side of myself while I'm searching, you know, or like I've thought about like, well, I could just focus on that and see if I could make that my thing now while I have like this whole cleared schedule. So it seesaws back and forth, and then I just don't come back to it essentially.
You seesaw back to thinking about like a creative outlet, a creative career. Okay.
Yeah, just because I don't know where to put that, or you know, like then like all of the other like feelings about creativity and like fear of failure and fear of success also like come up, like, you know, yeah.
Do
would it
you
be okay if I commented a little bit on that, just because I know that feeling?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Nico, and yeah, I think it's also it's a harder position that you're in because a lot of your career stuff has been creativity based, and a lot of people think, oh, creative things like TV shows, music, acting, or whatever, that's so fun. That's usually most people's recreation. So it does get harder when it's part of your job. And yeah, you're mentioning the whole thing of like, you have this free time, so shouldn't you be super creative and like productive and like building up a great portfolio? I can get how there can be some fear and perfectionism. At least that's like part of what I've experienced during times like that. What's helped me, I don't know if this will help you, is to kind of stop trying to force yourself into doing whatever this portfolio or thing that you're supposed to be doing, and maybe try to find a different outlet of creativity that isn't necessarily related to you. The most recent example I can think of for myself is I've got a lot of my own stuff going on, and I have also accomplished a lot in a short amount of time, but there just hasn't felt like any reward. It's like grind, grind, grind. Okay, guess what my reward is? I get to do it again. And if I don't, God forbid, I'll not be able to pay rent or what have you. I was on the fence about going to a burlesque show. I've liked burlesque shows in the past. I think they're hilarious and beautiful. But you know, I've seen them before, and I'm like, whatever, I'll go again. Went to the burlesque show, and it was awesome. It reminded me kind of who I was, and I'm like, wait, that's right. I love this shit. And it got me motivated to do things like, well, I talked to the dancers, and now I'm thinking about taking some classes. Like, I can't dance for shit, but I'm doing it anyway, just for funsies. It got me excited about costumes. It got me excited about just the other creative aspects of it. So I'm not, the lesson from this or whatever point I have isn't necessarily go to a burlesque show, but like, or do if that's what you want to do. But I think you need to find something that is kind of inspiring and beautiful to you, and not necessarily like the thing that you think you're supposed to be doing. I don't know what that is for you, whether it's going to a completely different movie genre or, I don't know, roller skating, something like that. But it sounds like you need an experience to kind of shake you up, wake you up to be like, right, this is who I am. This is what I like.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Nico. Yeah, I think that's like, I didn't need to offer an example because you offered them, you know, like an awesome example. And yeah, so I support that, Sarah, that, you know, finding something to do for you. And as a creative, often it's no like, you know, we as creatives don't have like a strong, like, reason for why we do creative work. It's just like, it's a part of us. Like, we need it. We need it like air. We need it like water. And so yeah, so I support what Nico's saying about, you know, finding like inspiration and a creative outlet that's for you, and not because it's like what you're supposed to be doing, because that really sucks the joy out of it.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your question, and thank you, Nico, for contributing. And yeah, it looks like we are at time, a little over time. So I'm happy to stay on for anybody who like has a burning question that they want to ask. I also want to mention I put my contact info up on the slide here. So if you want to drop me a note or explore working together, my email is lg@laurengoldbergcoaching.com, and my website is laurengoldbergcoaching.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, and yeah, I'm always shouting about stuff on there, and I love DMs, and I'd love to continue like supporting you and welcome you into this community of breaking the norm, breaking the rules, and creating our own rules. Thank you so much.